A state on edge, new wildfires are burning, and as the winds pick up, the power goes off. How utilities are trying to prevent disaster. Making a deal in Mission Valley, SDSU has its price. The city of San Diego has another. Will they find a solution to stay on schedule for a new stadium? Plus, a common, costly crime, and few victims will get any help. Why San Diego police say there's little they can do about vehicle break-ins. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, Jennifer Bangrove, who covers growth and development for the San Diego Union Tribune. Environment reporter Joshua Emerson Smith of the Union Tribune. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani, and investigative producer Tom Jones of NBC7 San Diego. Well, this week has been another stark reminder of the risk of wildfires and the drastic steps California is taking to prevent them. We're following the most immediate issue at hand. Wind-driven fires in LA and Riverside counties have destroyed dozens of homes. The fire started Thursday as hot, dry Santa Ana winds descended on the region. The largest of the two fires is burning in northern San Fernando Valley, where evacuation orders are in place for about 100,000 people. And across the state, utilities are taking the rare step of cutting power to millions of residents. It's all in an attempt to prevent wildfires like the ones we're seeing today. And some of the state's deadliest fires have been caused by utility equipment failures. A common sense argument is again being made. Building homes near wild lands prone to fire increases the risk of homes burning down. So, Shalina, start with these preventative power outages. As we said here in the open, huge swaths of the state are affected, right?
Yes, that is definitely the case. Wednesday, the first estimates that came out were that Pacific Gas and Electric cut out power to around 2 million customers. And then throughout that time period, around Thursday, that went down to around 800,000 customers, and slowly it's kind of trickled down to around 500,000. And when it comes to SoCal Edison, it's another 20,000, and San Diego Gas and Electric has around 500 without power right now. Just
a few hundred here. And that kind of tracks down the state because the winds are worse up north in this particular Santa Ana episode compared with where they are in San Diego County.
Yes.
Yeah, and now the last thing a power company wants to do is cut power, and we've had some people really angry, have we not?
We've definitely had a lot of folks angry about that. In fact, Governor Gavin Newsom actually slammed Pacific Gas and Electric earlier today. He came out with a statement, and he basically said, what happened is unacceptable. Power outages should be the last resort for utilities.
Well, that's a nice segue. You've set that up very nicely, because we have some sound here, a bite from the governor, and he was quite angry. Let's hear that.
But once our weather network has determined that extreme fire weather conditions have materialized in a given community, and our scientists and subject matter experts determine that if a fire starts, it will grow explosively and could be an immediate threat to life and property, that's where we take that step as a last resort to de-energize those power lines for the safety of the community.
Well, you're going to recognize that wasn't Governor Gavin Newsom. That was another soundbite we had from SDG&E spokesperson Brian D'Agostino. So I don't know if we'll get that bite from the governor, but as you say, he was quite angry. He blasted, oh, we do have Newsom now. Let's hear what he has to say.
Over the course of years and years and years, the kind of hardening of the grid was not done. Those were decisions that were made by Pacific Gas and Electric. They chose not to modernize their grid over the course of many, many years. It led to their own demise. It led to bankruptcy.
All right, so Joshua, he's talking there about, he's saying greed over decades. He's saying, you know, this has been a big problem. Of course, he helped this utility out, right, Pacific Gas and Electric, by kind of greasing his skids for the bankruptcy they're in, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the point is well taken, right? I mean, they could underground lines, but it's expensive, and it should have been done over decades, right? So we know that more than 90% of all wildfires in California are started by humans, right? These are not lightning strikes that get out of control. This is human-caused fires, and we need to take steps to prevent that, including, you know, hardening the electrical grid.
Now, there are studies backing up the move to cut down power in a Santa Ana event. Does it really work?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, it's a trade-off, right? People don't have electricity, that's a big deal, but we have to figure out how we're going to deal with the situation that we have now, which is lots of people living in wildfire-prone areas that basically, when we have wind-driven fires, can have a hard time escaping, right? I mean, people's lives are at risk. So, yeah, I think we have to take some drastic measures.
Yeah, as we certainly saw in Paradise last
Right.
year, 85 people killed in that town, basically leveled by that terrible fire. Now, Shalina, you reported this week SDG&E lost in court again. They're still trying to get back the $379 million, some of the losses that they suffered in the 2007 fire. Does that wrap that up? Is that the end of the court
So
road
it's
for them?
kind of the end of the line for SDG&E now. The Supreme Court case was kind of their last-ditch effort to be able to recover those funds through ratepayer money. And I actually reached out to SDG&E this week to find out what happens to that $379 million. And apparently it was accounted for in 2017 by Sempra Energy as simply a loss.
Okay, so that's finally behind it. We've talked about that over the years a lot on this show. So Joshua, you mentioned in your story, I think, pointed out about 11 million people in 4.5 million homes are in the wildlands or adjacent to the wildlands and
Right.
prone to these fire risks. And,
Right.
and very simply, the wind blows 60, 80 miles an hour in East County here, say, knocks down some live power lines, sparks a fire, and all of a sudden those wind-driven embers are coming to Scripps Ranch, all the way inland, everywhere we've seen, south and north.
Right, and I think the thing that we're really starting to understand now is that flames are not reaching these homes necessarily. These are embers that are raining down on communities and exploding these houses from the inside out. And then once one house goes up in a community, it spreads. It spreads to the rest of them, either through often highly flammable invasive plants that people sometimes have unwittingly planted themselves, or from just house to house as they go up in flames.
Jennifer?
Yeah, so I find it really fascinating, though, because we are in this housing crisis, right? And the governor has spoken about that. So is he trying to reconcile the fact that builders are continuing to build in these wildfire-prone areas, and yet it poses a threat to future residents?
Well, yes. I mean, there's a number of things that are going on there, right? Like, one, the politics of this is very hard. The building industry wants to develop plots of land that they've been holding for decades. Remember, you know this probably better than any of us here. If a developer owns a plot of land, they could be trying to develop that for 10, 15, 20 years. Could be $500 million in profits that are hanging in the balance. If all of a sudden you say, hey, by the way, that's off limits to you, I mean, that could piss off a lot of people.
Julia?
Yeah, and I think that really shows the necessity of the utilities and the housing industry kind of working together on this. The San Diego Union Tribune actually had a really good statistic that 54% of SDG&E's power lines are still in wildfire-prone areas. And so, and we're talking about hardening our systems, they obviously can't just be in the prettiest parts of town. They have to be happening in places like East County. And San Diego County Supervisor Diane Jacob, that was part of her coming out against the power outage this week.
Well, let me throw something out here. And I mean, is this getting to the point where we're permitting processes? And of course, they have this land, it's in these dangerous areas. Are you going to see land use decisions and permits come up against people saying, we can't do this because of the fire risk, you can't build there? I mean,
well, it's all up to the supervisors, right? There's no real rules at the state level saying you can't build in these fire-prone areas. They have to meet certain building requirements, but it's all up to the local elected officials to make the decision. Now, the response from the state and the local officials has been, we can make the homes, we can harden the homes with the latest building technology to a point where it is safe. Although we don't really know how that's going to play out. In Paradise, roughly about half of the homes that burned down were built after 2008 when the latest building standards came in. So we don't really know if we can harden homes to enough, right? To the point where, you can build in these areas. But the other key part about this that everyone seems to forget is that when you put homes in wildfire-prone areas, the people that live in those homes are just more ignition sources. So you're putting people in places where they're likely to start fires themselves.
because, as you say, 90% are started by people.
More than 90% are started by humans.
Yeah. So do you think you'll see some big push now to retrofit homes? Sounds like jobs and
Yes.
a revenue stream for somebody.
Yes, there is a big push to retrofit homes, and that was part of this huge package of bills that was passed last week and that Newsom signed. And they're going to throw a bunch of money at this, try to harden the homes, because like part of the Paradise problem was a lot of those homes were built, decades ago to the, some to no standards, right? And when those homes, so what makes a community weak when it comes to wildfire is the one home that isn't built to spec, right? Because then the embers get in that home, it explodes into fire, and it sets all the rest of the homes on fire. So yeah, there's a big move right now to harden homes and to improve the evacuation routes around some of the most vulnerable communities.
All right, about out of time on this segment, but we'll certainly be watching through the weekend. The weather calls for these winds, at least here, to be dying down tonight and maybe over the weekend. As bad as it is up in LA in certain areas, perhaps it won't get much worse this time out. All right, we're going to move on. There's a lot riding on complex negotiations between San Diego State University and the City of San Diego over the stadium site development in Mission Valley, like decisions on roadways and bridges and buildings and parkland and a stadium that we'll all live with for decades. The reputations of players involved and money, lots of money, everything at stake here. A basic question at the center of the haggling is, what is the Mission Valley site worth? And let's start there. Jennifer, you go up to a realtor, you get the comps, and you tell us what it's worth, right?
Yeah, I know. You can't do that with this kind of site. And in fact, this site has a really complex history as far as appraisals go. So we know that it was appraised back when Soccer City was on the table. And then there were, this appraisal process that we're in now. And so the recent number that came out is fair market value for 132 acres that SDSU wants to buy is $68.2 million. And the university will tell you that is the fair market value. We are happy to pay that number. However, the city of San Diego doesn't take that opinion. And actually, I should say the report notes, the appraisal notes, 68.2 has to do with 2017 dollars, because they looked at the fair market value per the language in the initiative, which September 30th, 2017. So the city's position is that's fair. I mean, that might be the fair market value in 2017. However, it doesn't consider other factors of Measure G, which is the city cannot pay for any portion of the river park, and it cannot absorb the cost of the demolition of the existing stadium. So the city believes, if you crunch some numbers, that's actually $86.2 million in 2017 dollars. I think what's really fascinating is our IBA just put out a report.
That's the independent budget analyst, we should say.
Right, and they're independent from the city and completely independent from SDSU. And her number is a little bit different. She seems to agree with the city's position that the $86.2 million number is actually more in line with Measure G. But if you look at 2019 dollars, the figure is closer to $104.5 million.
Okay, and San Diego State is supposed to make a specific bid Monday.
Yes.
We had a story on that.
I keep checking the council docket to see if the agenda has been updated. But everything I've been told is that they're going to city council. They will make a presentation. During that presentation, they are going to make a formal offer. We know that because of statements they've made, they're comfortable with the $68.2 million, so we'll probably hear that. But we'll also probably hear other concessions. Like now, they're going to build Fenton Parkway Bridge, which we've talked about. We have the bridge to nowhere. So there are some key caveats around that, though. So their estimate is $20 million, but they're saying the city would have to do the environmental review on that, so it would be separate than their environmental review process that is ongoing.
All right, I want to get into some of the more details and the things that may hang them up. But we do have some sound here from City Councilman Scott Sherman. That district includes Mission Valley. And before I go on, I should note San Diego State's broadcasting license is controlled by San Diego State University. So, I'm sorry, KPBS's broadcasting license. Let's hear from Scott Sherman and what he's saying about all these complex issues.
I think it boils down to the appraised price versus a price with deductions for a lot of the things that San Diego State says they're going to do. They said they'll build a river park and maintain it with no cost to the taxpayers' general fund. But yet they want to deduct the cost of that construction from the purchase price and the appraised value of the land. To me, that's costing the taxpayers money, because if you've got an appraised price here and you're deducting, say, $12 million out of it, then suddenly you've got a point where that's taxpayer money being used in offset their development. Same with the demolition of the stadium.
Well, the demolition he brings up, that's a big I can't even imagine all that concrete and where it's going to go. That's a huge problem, but it's millions of dollars just to tear the whole thing down before you start building, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the estimates in the appraisal is $10.2 million just for demolition.
Just for demolition. The costs and the value of the river park, some of these other things we're talking about, we're going to get into haggling over mitigation and traffic and all of this stuff, which is all on the table now.
It is on the table, and the reason that it's on the table is because SDSU is doing a parallel process. So they are, per state law, going through CEQA, which they need to do an environmental impact report that studies every single impact that could possibly arise out of the project, not just the stadium, but the full project that they want to do on this site. Traffic, that is the big
So there'll be some housing elements, retail, commercial, the stadium, as you say, traffic, as Josh was saying. Yeah.
Which is actually a big concern to the city as well.
Thank goodness there's no traffic in Mission Valley now.
No. But yes, so the university released a draft report, I think back in August. There was a public comment period. I got a hold of the city's response, and there are some what appear to be some fundamental flaws in the report, according to the city. The city won't use the word flaw, that's a very strong word, but they take issue with the university's traffic calculations, for instance. They take issue with the mitigations or the lack thereof that the university is proposing. They take issues with the hydrology that the university is planning to do. So if we get really into the weeds, on the eastern boundary of the site is Murphy Canyon Creek. And right now, that's a city responsibility, and sometimes that creek floods the project site. So the city would like the university to take that creek under, to take control of that creek, and they might even have to realign that creek because that creek flows into the San Diego River and does create flooding problems. But the city also identified in the EIR, in this environmental report, that if the creek floods part of the project site, and even though SDSU is planning for that, that creates some other environmental impacts that they're not necessarily okay with.
Well, let's hear San Diego State's side. We've got negotiator Gina Jacobs, how she sees the negotiations going so far.
I mean, I think this is actually a good thing in some ways because it really shows that we're getting toward closer to the end of this process. And I don't think that this is insurmountable. I think that this is something we can, work out and determine and get to the end game, so where we can actually purchase this property and do what we want to do, which is expand our campus.
All right, so we're at this point. Is this what the public should expect? This is a big negotiation, a lot of moving parts, as we've said. We haven't touched on all of them, but it's real complex. Don't panic. Things are moving along okay.
Yes and no. The university might be panicking a little bit. I can't say for certain on that. I'm just guessing, because the environmental impact report is actually a really crucial part of this process, because it is a part of state law. And if something comes up between now and when they would like to finalize their report and then go to their board of trustees for approval, that is significant enough that it hasn't been identified in the report, they will have to recirculate that report, and that could be months of delays.
Okay, and we're just about out of time here, but the university's fairly aggressive in their timetable, right? They want to start building the stadium ready for the 2022 season. Right?
They want to certify their environmental report in January. They want to close on the land in January, and they want to break ground in February.
Wow! All right, lots to talk about. We'll be back and doing this again many times, as I can see. We're going to move on. We can all imagine, and many of us have actually experienced, the anger and frustration of returning to your car to find somebody has broken into it. It's hardly an uncommon experience in San Diego. The immediate urge, call the cops, find that thief, arrest him. Turns out that's the height of wishful thinking. And Tom, start there with how many vehicle break-ins happen approximately in San Diego?
Right, yes. So we were looking at San Diego police data, and on average there's about 7,200 vehicle break-ins a year. But every year they've been on the rise. And out of those break-ins, 97% result in no arrests, they're open investigations, no resolution.
97%. Well, that's interesting. Now, you started your story off with a typical case, a victim, Peter Kang. Tell us what happened to him.
Yeah, so Peter Kang, very, just like all of us, he was working out at his gym in Carmel Valley, comes out, sees his car's been broken into, his wallet's gone, And first thought was, oh, well, there's a police substation like really close by, so I'll just drive over there to go talk to them.
They'll want to be right on the case.
Right, they'll want to be right on it. But police tell him, hey, sir, that's not really how it works. You need to fill out a form online. And so he wasn't discouraged just yet, so he started looking up on his bank's app, looking to see if there was any purchases made. And he saw that the thieves were buying things at the UTC mall at stores he would never go to, like Foot Locker. So he goes to the stores and says, hey, can I get your surveillance video? My credit card was stolen. It was just used here. And again, they said, sorry, sir, that's just not how it works. We can't just give you surveillance video. So in the end, he filled out the form online, but he never heard back from
All right,
police.
now we've got a couple of sound bites. Yeah, it is. It's frustrating as we've all.
So much work, so much sleuthing.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes.
So we'll get back to that in a second, but we do have a couple of bites from, first of all, Peter Kang, and then from Lieutenant Sean Tikuchi of the San Diego Police Department. Let's hear their explanations on this.
What I first tried to do was go to the police station just down the street on El Camino Real, but turns out that you can't speak to them in person. In fact, they just give you a number to call. From my sense of the call was that they weren't super receptive. It was more like they were just kind of going through the motion.
We don't have a unit of officers assigned for break-ins. The reason why is because it wouldn't be an effective use of resources. Fingerprints aren't left behind. DNA isn't left behind. Tools to the crime aren't left behind. And in some cases, even if we have video surveillance, identifying individuals using video surveillance is very, very difficult.
Yeah, for our radio audience, they showed a little video surveillance, and he's right, it is.
Right.
Just because you have a movie doesn't mean it's made by Spielberg. So we assume the criminals breaking into cars are well aware of these stats and the limitations regarding police follow-up. Right?
I think it's safe to say. I mean, it's a crime of opportunity. Maybe the monetary value isn't that great, but what's really stopping them? Yeah, the risk is low.
The risk of getting caught.
Yeah,
right.
I find it kind of hard to believe that there isn't just that much evidence available. I mean, did you look into that at all?
You would think. I mean, basically what police told us is they don't have anyone assigned looking for evidence.
Yeah, so if there's fingerprints, if there's DNA, whatever, even video in the case of this Peter Kang going out and getting his own video, they've got nobody to go out there and do the fingerprinting, run the fingerprints. There's just too many of them.
Exactly.
Right.
They say it's just not an effective use of resources.
Now, would they expend the effort and maybe get a little bit of a task force and throw a few detectives if, say, one neighborhood is getting, dozens of break-ins at a time, which happens, right?
Well, it's a lot more victims, maybe some sort of like theft ring, or in the rare occurrence where they could catch someone in the act. But I mean, how rare is that, But it really comes down to the victim count.
Right. Jennifer?
It's so interesting to me, though, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm on my local Nextdoor, and this is the number one thing.
Tell us what Nextdoor is.
Oh, the community website where, yes, it's a social media site where
everybody kind of watches out for each other.
And you're all neighbors, essentially. Right. And you can only see stuff in your community. But the number one thing that I see in my neighborhood is like, somebody broke into my car, and everyone in the comments is, don't even bother calling the police.
Right. And that was kind of one of the reasons that kind of tipped us off to wanting to look at this. So
now they maybe get it from the other end if they find somebody who's got a bunch of stolen things here. They've got a bunch of loot, and maybe they're trying to move them, sell them for pennies on the dollar somewhere. Maybe they can catch a ring on that end and that side of it.
But again, it's not. They don't necessarily have agents assigned looking for those, situations.
Yeah. They just maybe happen on it in another investigation.
Exactly. Right.
Now, you reported on some of the hardest hit parking lots around town. Tell us where those places are.
So San Diego Zoo, and this is looking at the last 5 years, San Diego Zoo's parking lot had the most break-ins, but it comes with a caveat. It has been going down each year. It's probably because, technology, cameras. I know they have a watchtower, in the parking lot. Behind San Diego Zoo, there was Fashion Valley Mall, Mission Valley Mall. The Coles Mountain, there's a little parking area if you want to go hike Coles Mountain. That area came in number 4.
Right off Navajo on the front side.
Right.
There's several ways to get up that, but that's the main one.
A lot of break-ins every year, and then last was Alvarado Hospital, the parking lot right there.
So that's where people are watching.
Yeah,
it's interesting because on TV and in the media and all, we see that cameras are everywhere. I mean, the video is everywhere. How many times you see a day that YouTube has posted this or that, or this crazy thief never thought anybody was watching and they're watching, but it doesn't seem to apply here.
No, not really. And I mean, really, all you can do to, is more preventative measures. Make sure you don't leave your valuables in view or you keep them with you, better yet. Most auto insurance policies don't cover stolen items, but if you have like a renter's insurance policy and you insure your personal belongings, homeowner's policy, that will most oftentimes cover your belongings, even if they're outside of your home or your apartment.
I remember when I lived in the Bay Area, the mantra was don't even leave an empty cardboard box in your car.
Yeah, because there's so many
valuable,
so many enticing.
Wow.
Okay, a few seconds left here. Again, all you can do is harden your stuff, hide your stuff.
Exactly.
But you're not even going to make an insurance claim normally because maybe it's a purse, you cancel your credit card,
and
you're out a few bucks, your deductible isn't going to make it pay.
Yeah, so it's I don't know, it's kind of frustrating that there's really no avenue. It's really mostly all you can do.
All right, out of time. But take the metro. There's your take the trolley. That's it. That's the answer to that. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Jennifer Van Grove of the San Diego Union Tribune, Joshua Emerson Smith of the Union Tribune, Shalini Chatlani of KPBS News, and Tom Hall of NBC7 San Diego. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today, and join us again next Friday on the Roundtable.